Thank you. Just first an observation and maybe two questions. And the first observation is, I come from Nigeria, well known to have not just plenty of oil, but also high corruption, and until recently, even up to now, quite unstable and unstable government. The question, the experience we generally have, the people in Nigeria is, you keep hearing about this oil and the billions, and you really don't understand what is happening. And I am an archbishop. I'm not exactly what you might call a very ignorant person. And yet, when I try to read these things that they bring out, the reports, the one of EIT, what do you call them? I can't make head or tail of it. It all looks so esoteric, so difficult to understand. And the ordinary people on the ground, the ordinary person on the ground simply tend to not bother. And that is why the kind of outrage you should expect from the citizenry against the rapacious attitudes, not only of the oil companies, but also of our leaders, just doesn't happen. That's the observation. But the two questions I want to raise is, Sir William saying at the beginning, you did raise the fact that almost it seems that wherever there's extractive industry, you end up with this terrible situation of instability, wars, and so on. We are only lucky in Nigeria, but even we are not out of the woods yet. I'm just wondering, at this point, when will the international community, don't ask me what that animal is, when will the international community devise a way or somehow of addressing this issue as a matter that concerns the entire, our entire human family, so that we don't leave it to countries to just sink or swim? The second question, before coming here, I was at a meeting of the World Economic Forum in Abu Dhabi. Every time I go to the Gulf states, I keep asking myself, how come here the Gulf states from petroleum have performed those miracles of their development, whereas in countries like my own, not to talk of Equatorial Guinea, and we don't know what will happen to South Sudan. Ghana is trembling. What's happening? Since you people are so well versed in these matters. Thank you.
Well, the last question I'll sort of pick off the easier. I mean, one of the reasons why the Gulf states also, is that they have very small populations, or at least they have very small populations of citizens, whereas Nigeria is, I think it's the most populous nation in Africa.
170 million.
Sorry? 170 million. So it's not. So it's not quite as simple to get a very, very high living standard from the oil. But your main question, it's just a very, very tough. There are these efforts, of which the extractive industries initiative is probably the most prominent, but they can only work with the cooperation of companies and governments. Unfortunately, there is no, I guess we come up against the problem, there is no world government in this area. I think, I thought your point about, why isn't there more outrage inside Nigeria was a very good one. I think, if you could, if there's increasing awareness and really public pressure on this, within the country, that's obviously, but you just have to work on the influence that governments, can bring to bear. I'm sure this is raised repeatedly within international meetings, the influence that some of the companies that are more willing to go down this route can bring to bear. And the efforts, I'm sure, of some within government for greater transparency. Because I agree with from the previous lady here that, transparency is this. You have transparent national budgets and transparent payments between oil companies and governments that can be traced. That's a way forward. But I'm afraid my answer is a little bit despairing, at least in the short term. Others can.
With respect to the international community support, there are the international organizations, whether IMF and World Bank and World Secretariat, they are trying to help local governments to set up a transparent, well-functioning system. But at the end, we have to respect the sovereignty of the states. So there is a limit, when you go, and I go on with my colleagues to some countries, mainly in Africa, we are advisors. We cannot impose. We can give our advice, but at the end, the implementation is within the hand of the host governments and the officials. One thing that people can do, you said, yes, you read those things, you think this is just something, a language you don't understand, but there are lots of NGOs outside who are willing to offer training, they are willing to simplify the message so that the information is more accessible to the general public, and at least they can ask the smallest step. Ask their governments, why don't you publish the old contracts, for instance? Why there is this issue of confidentiality? What is confidential? This is a small step, but major step, and gradually the knowledge will be spread across the country. But it has to come from within the country, more from outside the country.